Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regular council meeting of July 29th, 2024. The recommendation is that the regular council meeting be called to order at 5:35 p.m. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And we'll be jumping into the closed recommendation that a closed meeting be held on July 29th, 2024 at the Wilmot Administrative Complex in accordance with Section 239 2B of the Municipal Act to consider a personal matter about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees. There is a slight amendment. We are not going in about the second part that was circulated, which was also under Section 239 2B. So just the first item for all, and if I could just have a mover for that recommendation. Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. We will return at roughly 7 p.m. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our reconvening of open session for our July 29th, 2024 meeting. We're reconvening at 7:02. May I please have a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor, and that carries unanimously. We did have a moment of reflection. I wanted to acknowledge that yesterday, Ron Dietrich, a former Township of Wilmot councillor for St. Agatha and longtime former employee of the Township's Infrastructure Services Department, passed away. Township of Wilmot Council and staff extend our sincere condolences to Ron's wife, Joanne, their family, and loved ones. I will now turn it over to Councillor Sadhu for our territorial acknowledgement, please.
We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between the Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant in the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, we were reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you, Councillor. We do have additions to tonight's agenda, and that's under delegations regarding item 12.1. We do have 3 speakers who I will call upon once we get to that part of the agenda. Councillors, the recommendation is that the agenda as presented for July 29th, 2024 be adopted. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Councillor Cressman.
Yes, 11.5, I'd like to declare a pecuniary interest in. It's the extension of the contract for engineering consulting services for the Bully Street Stormwater Management Facility retrofit. And the original contract was awarded to Walter Fady. This extension continues with Walter Fady, and my oldest son Garth is CEO at Walter Fady.
Thank you very much. Once we get to that part of the agenda, as it's all a part of consent, we will remove that part for a separate vote. And on to our minutes from our previous meeting, the minutes of the June 24th, 2024 regular council meeting and July 17th, 2024 special council meeting have been presented, and the motion is that we adopt them as presented. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. As I did mention, we do have delegations coming up this evening. We have 3 registered delegations who wish to speak to matters on this agenda. When we get to those items, I will call upon each delegation individually when it's their time to speak. In order to maintain a respectful and orderly environment during the meeting, I kindly request all delegates respect the following guidelines. Please do not interrupt councillors, staff, or other delegates while they are speaking. Refrain from making derogatory remarks about councillors, staff, or others, and do not use hate speech or defamatory comments. Although it is rare, I would like to remind delegates that a failure to adhere to these guidelines may result in your microphone being muted or removal from the meeting. Please keep in mind that each speaker has a maximum of 7 minutes to address the meeting. I believe all of you who are speaking already know all those rules as you've been here before, but just to run through those. And yes, once we get to item 12.1, I will call you up. In terms of correspondence, we have 4 items. Is there anything that anyone would like to pull from correspondence? Seeing none, all those in favor, all right, sorry, I need a mover to pass the correspondence. Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Stu. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And our consent agenda items, apart from 11.5, are there any other items that councillors would like to pull at this point in time? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I would like. Through you, Mayor. Yes, I would like to pull the one on drainage, the petition for drainage from Kevin and Tracy Erb. 11.6.
Very good. You're welcome to speak to 11.6 now.
Yes, it's very brief, through you, Mayor. I guess I would assume we're going to have further detail for that I see there's a considerable drains in that vicinity, and I look at the properties that aren't included, and you kind of ask yourself the question: are these? I don't know whether I would ask this of Director Mullen, do other adjoining properties get asked if they're interested in an extension, or whoever is appropriate on this one? Caitlin?
Go ahead,
Thank you,
Kate.
Councillor Cressman. Through you, Mayor Salonen. Yes, there will be an on-site meeting for the extensions as well as a public information meeting when the engineer report is prepared, and they will receive invitations when council considers that engineer report, and they can add their names to the petition at that time.
Thank you very much, Deputy Clerk Boss. Any other questions on that one, Councillor Pressman? Okay, so in that case, since that item's already pulled, we will vote on item 11.6 first of the consent agenda. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. We will now vote on items 11.1 through to 11.8, excluding 11.5 and 11.6 that we just did. Sorry for all the confusion there, Clerk. If everybody knows, so we're now voting on everything apart from what we just did in the conflict. May I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And lastly, we will do item 11.5, excluding Councillor Cressman. May I have a mover for that, please? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to our reports, which is 12.1. The recommendation is that report COR-2024-36 be received for information, and further, that the clerk be directed to bring forward a bylaw on the August 26, 2024 regular council agenda to implement the changes outlined in this report. To get this on the floor, may I first have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. And I will now invite our Manager of Legislative Services and Clerk, Jeff Bunn, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. This report stems from a June 10th, 2024 motion introduced by Councillor Sadhu that staff be directed to report back at Council on July 29th on municipal best practices and recommendations to change the procedural bylaw as it relates to permitting up to 3 registered delegates at each meeting to speak on any matter of public interest within the jurisdiction of the township. The report outlines a new process that Council can consider. Staff reviewed 24 like-sized municipalities across Ontario to get a broad scope of what other municipalities are doing in terms of providing opportunities and tools and mechanisms to enable more opportunities for citizens to be able to speak at a council meeting. Within the report itself, as an attachment, there is a draft bylaw that's been prepared, and the draft bylaw outlines 2 different sets of delegations. The first being a specific delegation that would relate to items that are on the agenda and maintain sort of that status quo of the process that we have right now in place, as well as an updated process for general interest delegations. I would be speaking more to what Councillor Sadhu was looking for and what Council had directed staff for to allow that opportunity for members of the public to be able to come in and delegate on matters that are not listed specifically on the agenda. I'm happy to take any questions that Council may have.
Thank you very much, Clerk Bunn. So just for everyone's understanding, we will have Council asking specific technical questions to the clerk right now. Then we will invite up our delegates, and then Council can have their debate, and then we will vote. So Councillor Cressman.
So through you, Mayor, to Clerk Bunn, page 2, 6.3.4, members of council shall not be permitted to ask questions of that delegation. That is the old policy, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
I have one additional question. I guess the timing, I just highlighted. In terms of the timing of the 12 noon on the Monday proceedings, since most of ours are Monday council meetings, I should say through you, Mayor, to Clerk Bunn, that would mean a week's notice would be required in advance of a person wanting to question. Is that correct? Am I reading that properly?
Through the mayor, that's correct.
And then as a follow-up, is that consistent with what other municipalities are requiring?
Through the mayor, that's a great question. It is consistent in terms of that there is a limitation. So what I found when looking at the other municipalities that we surveyed was that it can be up to 2 weeks. It could be longer. We settled on 48 hours, primarily as an opportunity for two things. One, so that staff and council could be notified of the request, and that there was some sort of opportunity in case there's information that could be shared in advance, then we could do that and pull that information together. And the other piece of it was to ensure that the request itself met the other rules. And so we had an opportunity to work with the delegate to either share if there were concerns or if the delegation was not able to proceed, that it wasn't last minute and happening when the agenda is being published on the Wednesday. So that was the reason for that.
Any additional technical questions at this time, councillors? Oh, Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, it did make a note here of obviously the parties involved being mayor, clerk, CAO in terms of who would sort of use discretion to review the delegations. Is that in keeping with standard practice as well, or how did you achieve that?
Through the mayor, yep, that is, again, part of a normal process, that there is an opportunity at first glance. The clerk's role is to look at the general bylaw and does the request meet the intent, and it's usually black and white. There's some gray area there where there's some interpretation, and in the case where there's the interpretation, rather than making it a staff person's decision solely, we always believe that there's an opportunity for the mayor, who works with citizens and has those conversations, and the rest of council to understand if there's an opportunity to move it forward. So it is a standard practice to have some sort of check and balance there, whether that's just the mayor or just the mayor and CAO and not the clerk. That's really council's discretion, but there's usually some opportunity for someone to be responsible to make that decision.
Any additional technical questions at this point, councillors? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much, Clerk Bunn. We do have 3 registered delegations, so I will invite our first speaker, Kevin Thomason, to address council. And Kevin, you will have 7 minutes. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Excellent. Thank you. Honorable Mayor, councillors, and guests. My name is Kevin Thomason, and I am a longtime Wilmot resident who has spent much of the past 29 years trying to persuade Wilmot Township to update its procedural bylaws to be more accommodating to its citizens and be more welcoming to the public. It is fantastic to see this staff report recommending changes to the procedural bylaws to increase the opportunities for the public to address Wilmot Council. Thank you to Wilmot staff for completing such a detailed analysis of 24 like-sized communities and prepare this report in a relatively short period of time since Councillor Sadhu brought forward this motion on June 10th. The concept of having both specific interest delegations and general interest delegations is a great way to permit the public to address council and bring forward items of interest and concern. While I'm very supportive of the approach that staff is recommending, there are 2 concerns I have with how the newly proposed amendments to the Wilmot procedural guidelines could be interpreted. First is the caveat that delegates can only speak to, quote, issues within the jurisdiction of the Township of Wilmot. While I understand we can't have citizens wasting valuable council and staff time on issues the township has no control over, such as saving dolphins or if UFOs actually exist or not, there is a danger that this qualification could be used to greatly limit citizen delegations. For example, if the Wilmot Land Assembly and the Fight for Farmland is a regional initiative, does it mean that citizens won't be allowed to speak to it, despite it having massive impact on every person in our municipality that council and staff need to be aware of and understand? So I urge you to ensure flexibility, be accommodating, and not overly restrictive with the interpretation of within the jurisdiction of the township. My second concern is a statement that is part of section 6.4.6, number 2, and that is a general interest delegation can be denied if, quote, no written submission together with handouts is provided with the request. Requiring applicants to provide full written submission of their presentation in advance of determining if they'll even be allowed to speak has the danger of being perceived as censorship. I realize that the intent is to try to ensure that subject matters coming forward are appropriate and within the jurisdiction of the municipality. However, if strictly enforced that only complete written submissions will be required, it could have the effect of discouraging rather than encouraging community engagement and participation. Few people, even on council night, arrive here with a completely scripted presentation, let alone days in advance. Many people talk off the cuff or from the heart without a script or prepared presentation. We need to ensure that the delegation request form is simple and the expectation is that only the topic or theme of the presentation is needed, not a word-for-word approval or censorship. And a final issue is what happens when numerous citizens apply for just 3 general interest delegation spots. Will there be any sort of wait list? Will names from the previous meeting be carried forward to the next meeting? Or will it just come down to like getting concert tickets? And who is the fastest at dialing the phone the minute they're released and who gets in the gates? There should be some clear procedure and expectations on how overflow will be handled and when or how the process begins for each meeting. In conclusion, it's great to see this initiative coming forward. I urge you to support this staff report on ways to increase the opportunity for the public to address council and be a part of the public record at council meetings. This could be a very important element in the ongoing transformation of Wilmot's procedural bylaws that will be far more welcoming to citizens and help to bring Wilmot more in alignment with many other municipalities. It will be an important milestone to not only allow, but perhaps even encourage citizen participation and engagement at council and in township endeavors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Councillors, any questions of our delegate at this time? Okay. Oh, Councillor Cressman?
Yes, Kevin, I'm glad to hear a very positive presentation.
Yeah.
And I guess the question I had is, how would you see the multiple request handled? What would be a suggestion or something?
Yeah, good question. And this is where, and I don't know, I hate to answer a question with a question, but I don't know what staff learn from the other 24 municipalities, Wasaga Beach and all the others, and that do they have a procedure for when they get an overflow situation? In the end, I imagine it's going to be pretty spiky, meaning there will be times there's issues like the fight for farmland where 333 spots might not be enough or whatever, and then there's going to be other times, there's been many council meetings in the past that I've literally been the only citizen sitting in the gallery here. There certainly wasn't people elbowing each other out of the way to speak. So, I think it's going to depend, but I think that somehow there needs to be consideration given for when those big spikes occur, how to smooth it out and even it out, because we want people to feel that they're heard. We need citizens involved and engaged and participating, and I think we can craft things in a way that does that, but it just requires having those clear expectations set out from the onset and people feeling that it's a fair process.
Very good. Any other questions at this time, councillors? Seeing none, thank you very much again for joining us, Kevin, and for your comments.
Thank you, and thank you to staff.
Thank you very much. On to our next delegate, and that is Mark Reeser on behalf of the Waterloo Federation of Agriculture. Mark, you've been here many times. We're happy to see you again, and you'll have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good to be here tonight, and I have some things to say about delegating that I think are important. And I'd like to express those opinions as a layperson, as a farmer, and as a citizen of this township. It is an intimidating and stressful endeavor to come up here and delegate for many people. It may be the first time they have publicly interacted directly with their government. Yet it is one of the most fundamental tenets of a democracy that people have a right to speak. And the right to speak to those people who represent them and to be heard. So I'd ask you in all cases that you interpret bylaws liberally, gently, and give citizens the benefit of the doubt and respectfully listen to those who take a risk to come here and share their concerns. So the Federation of Agriculture is in general support of this bylaw. This is a good thing. Thanks for the work that you've done. I hope that in some form it is passed. We have some suggestions that could make a good bylaw even better. The first one would be, and I'm not even clear exactly if this is in or out of the bylaw, that council be allowed to ask questions of clarifications to the presenter. I think that's so important that councillors be given the power to ask questions of clarification. That's part of their job. I think that should be specifically in there if it's not. And secondly, that the presenter not be required to submit a written report beforehand, but rather a summary of a report. Trust the presenter. I think that's something we can do for everyone who lives in this township. Censorship is a thing that is distasteful, I think, to all of us, and should only be used as a very last resort. And finally, we ask that presenters be permitted to address issues that directly affect the municipality, not just issues that are under the jurisdiction of the township. In other words, a very liberal interpretation of what affects us here in this township. I think that's so important. And so in summary, I would say there are a couple things here that could be improved. This is a good report. I'm glad that we are looking at representing constituents perhaps better than we have in the past. People have a right to be heard. Everyone has a right to be heard. And I would hope that council would endeavor to make it as easy and as comfortable as possible for people to come up here and interact with their council and the people that govern them. And it's been my experience that sometimes the people who are the most inarticulate can say the most profound things. And unless you're listening, you miss it. So I'd like to say one final word, and that is thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for this report. Thank you for endeavoring to make this a better council and better government for people here in Wilmot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. Looks like Councillor Cressman does have a question before you run away there.
You always have inspiring speeches, Mark. Thank you for that. I guess the question I have through you, Mayor, is what about, in this case, some other municipalities that I'm aware of, you have to have a time interval before you're allowed to come back and raise an issue again. And I didn't see that in this, but I guess I might as well not beat around the bush. I believe at regional council you have to wait a certain interval of time before you can come and ask and present and delegate again. So I'd be interested in your opinion of that. Again, I would assume you would be liberal interpretation and, in terms of, did I describe the circumstances? Yeah. Maybe I'll have the mayor describe it since she sits at regional council.
Sure, I'm happy to give a quick summary for context for everyone else. I believe that you're familiar with them though, Mark. So at the region, we do allow delegates who are not delegating to items on the agenda. However, we do have in that bylaw, it says that for 6 months, I believe, and I'm going off of memory here, but I believe it is for 6 months, you're not able to come back on a non-agenda item. So that means you just can't register through this way as well. So I believe if your question is correct, you would just like to know, Councillor Cressman would like to know where your thoughts are on something like that.
Well, I would certainly agree that if you come back in a short period of time delegating on the same question, you didn't do a good enough job the first time. So that I can understand. I would suggest I would be more liberal in the interpretation if a delegator came back for a different issue. I think that it's important to recognize that there are many things that are important to people, and that it's not just one. And be gentle in interpretation of that, because I can come forward with something completely different. And it's important to me, it's important to my constituents, it's important to everybody to do that, I think. I hope I've answered your question appropriately. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions at this time for Mark? Okay, seeing none, thank you again for joining us. And lastly on this topic, we have Andrew Wilson. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and you will have 7 minutes to address council.
Thank you. Mayor, councilors, staff, and council meeting attendees. My name's Andrew Wilson. I'm a resident of New Hamburg, and I'm delegating in support of report COR-2024-36, the procedural bylaw amendment to permit delegations to address council at each meeting on various issues of public interest. I note that the report documents that staff found that the majority of other municipalities of similar size to Wilmot allow general interest delegation. General interest being the term the report uses to identify delegations at a regular council meeting on issues of general interest within the jurisdiction of the municipality, but not on the agenda. Wilmot Council represents the people of Wilmot, and Wilmot staff role is to enact council's directions. The main goal of this amendment is to allow citizens to make council aware of issues that have recently arisen and need addressing by council in a timely manner. Such issues may have short-term deadline dates, which would pass before the process of getting them put on a future agenda could be accomplished. Furthermore, this change would allow the content of the delegation to be made part of the public record. I have one suggested change to the amendment, which Councillor Cressman highlighted. I recommend that council should be allowed to ask questions of the delegation, particularly for clarification purposes. This is contrary to the proposed version of bylaw 2023-34, item 6.5.3, and it was item 6.3.4 of the current bylaw. It states, and I quote, that council shall not be permitted to ask questions of that delegation. I recommend that item 6.5.3 be removed from the proposed version. In summary, this proposed amendment with a minor change is an important improvement which will allow citizens to have more options to be involved in municipal affairs and for council to hear about issues that are of immediate concern to their constituents. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Are there any questions at this time, councillors? Okay. Seeing none, I just want to make sure, Councillor Cressman. Thank you very much again for joining us, Andrew. I really appreciate you sharing your remarks. So, councillors, that brings us, does anybody have any points they want to talk on, debate, or perhaps suggest? Councillor Sadhu?
Thank you, through the mayor. For 6.4.6, it says the request could be denied under the following circumstances. Council previously indicated it would not hear further from this delegation. I'm just trying to wonder, A, why that's in there, and B, like, has this been said or done before? Not that I'm aware of, but.
Through you, Mayor, not to my knowledge, not at Wilmot, certainly. This is a provision that has been included in other ones. My understanding is why that would be done is in case there are repeat of the same delegation on the same matter, council can move a motion to say, you know, for instance, we've decided on that. We've made a decision, it's gone forward, it can't be reversed at this point. Thank you very much, but unfortunately we're not able to continue the conversation because council can't change that decision. It would be used in those circumstances, but I can understand where your question is coming from on that. Councillor
Stu for a follow-up.
Not really a follow-up, just a general statement or comment. I'm happy with the report. It's a long time coming for our township. I'll be honest, when I first read it, I was kind of iffy of why do we still need to make residents jump through hoops to be able to come and speak to us, and we should be more accessible. There's certain things like the written submission. I feel like we should streamline that and essentially not have it go through too many layers. I mean, the clerk is the expert of our bylaws. As far as I'm concerned, it should just be the clerk looking at it. And for the written submission, it should just be something in general of, this is the topic I want to speak to. Is it in our jurisdiction? Great. And we don't need to go and debate through too many people. Just, it helps streamline things, and essentially that's what I would be looking for. Is we want to be more accessible. We don't want people to be discouraged from speaking to us, and we want to make this as easy and simple as possible.
Clerk Bunn.
Through the mayor, I'm very happy that you brought that up and gave me an opportunity here to speak to the written submission piece. And certainly, Mr. Thomason, I saw you somewhere, and I'm sorry, wherever you sat, but we had a quick exchange of emails, and I think in that case, I appreciate being called out because it was unclear in the bylaw, and having it being pointed out to me, I would agree. The intent there was certainly to have a written summary so that staff, when we're taking the request, have a better idea of what people are requesting. And I'm sure you can appreciate sometimes we'll receive requests and they're very short and I want to come on my road. And so there's a lot of back and forth there where we're trying to understand what is the nature of the actual request. So in this case, what we're really looking for is a written submission that just tells us a little bit more detail of what we can expect, and then it gives me the ability to process that request effectively. So I think we're certainly aligned, and the intent there didn't come out exactly as I would have appreciated in the text itself. So thank you.
Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor. Would it be better to have it read a written summary of your request? And that would kind of position it or nuance it towards clear indication if there was prep work that staff had to do or some background information. I think it would, rather than having a line by line document.
I believe that the clerk has agreed, I guess if council is in agreeance of changing that wording. So council, is there a agreeance in changing that wording? Yes, Councillor Martin? Not yet. Oh, okay, sorry. I guess my just point of clarification on there, I don't think it's really a big problem, but I do want to acknowledge that maybe not everybody is able to email in. I'm assuming written can also be handwritten submissions / as clerks / deputy clerks, you guys would know. Do you get more phone submissions? I just don't want to be creating a barrier by making it saying written only.
Through the mayor, I would suggest that I don't want to use the word vast majority, the majority of our requests are done electronically through our online portal. We do receive a number of phone calls and emails, and I know through the mayor's office too, you receive contact or through members of council with citizens looking to delegate, and those are just forwarded to us. We appreciate when the form is used because it gives us all the information we're looking for, but certainly if someone was to give us a phone call, we will be happy to take that delegation request, and sometimes we do ask if they can just submit the form when they get a moment, but we do process it on the spot as we receive them.
That's wonderful. Councillor Martin, did you have any questions about the wording update that we want?
No, I through you, Mayor Salonen, I'm in favor of moving forward with this and not making it onerous. I appreciate the delegates that have spoken this evening and their ideas. So I think this says that the mayor, in consultation with CAO, has the authority. It doesn't mean that they automatically will deny it. And having an understanding of what topic someone is coming to speak about, I think, is important. So I think as long as we don't make this too onerous, I agree with Councillor Sidhu on that.
Thank you. And I got nods from the rest of council, so I'm not going to go back on that. But Councillor Wilkinson, did you have other comments?
Through the chair, there was a point that was brought up multiple times regarding permission to ask delegations questions. I mean, again, after reviewing the bylaw, I just confirmed the revision to the bylaw would be that clause is struck, right? 6.3.4 does not exist. So in essence, special interest or, the general interest, both we could ask questions of, wouldn't be prevented, just to clarify.
Through the mayor, that's correct. The provision where it remains in the bylaw that there are no questions is in circumstances where council chooses to allow a delegate to appear before council where notice has been waived and there's been no notice to the public that delegation is coming. And the reason for that is we want to ensure that the public has an opportunity to see the agenda, know what's going to be discussed, and if there is an item that they want to know more about or that they're interested in, they have an opportunity to also attend and hear the full debate. So if we're opening it up for conversation between council and the delegate, it may be seen as the individual is not given that opportunity to equally participate. So we like to make sure that there's some parameters around it. That's the only case where that would apply, where questions cannot be asked. And sorry, through the mayor, that was existing. That is not something new, but that was in the previous bylaw as well.
So just for complete clarity, that would mean that would not apply to any of these delegates should we go forward with the changes? Okay, very good. Any additional questions or comments at this time, councillors? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I guess the only other outstanding concern or thought that I had was regarding sort of the group or the process that would be followed in terms of someone puts forward a request to delegate. So it would follow through the clerk would ensure that it fits with everything. What happens, I guess, or what would be the procedure for if someone was denied the opportunity to speak? I mean, do they have an appeal process? Is that something that conceivably could be appealed to the mayor and the mayor could make a ruling on that? I'm just thinking through things that could potentially arise.
Through the mayor. So the way it's outlined right now under 6.4.5 is that the clerk will intake the request itself, review the subject matter to ensure that it fits within the bylaw requirements, and if there's any referral to the administration for comment, we can follow those processes. If it's an outright, you're unable not to come to council, that would require the mayor and the CAO in collaboration to make that decision. So it has taken the authority away from one individual to have to make that decision, but it is sort of in and of itself its own appeal process, because what will happen is, I'll just walk through like a sample. I take it in, or my team does, we review it, we determine, maybe it's after a deadline or it's not within the jurisdiction of the township. Now what do? We would send it off to the mayor and to the CAO and say, here's what we received, this is our interpretation of it, perhaps you have a different interpretation, and then we would look to the mayor and the CAO to advise us of how they want to handle it. In such circumstances, then we would email or probably call the delegate to let them know that that decision's been made, the reasons why, and let them know of other opportunities to connect with their member of council should they wish to do so.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair. I'm in agreement with my colleagues here in terms of the spirit of this and the way it's written, and with the delegates as well. I think ultimately this is a great first step and will hopefully serve as a tool to allow greater access to council, greater transparency, just greater discussion altogether. And I think it's important that any government be accessible. So I really like where this is going. I have made a note here regarding the 3 delegations, and I understand that will be likely right from the get-go an issue and something that could potentially need to be managed. I'm wondering if we put forward some sort of provision that we proceed forward as is and get this in place, but then give you maybe a little bit more time to revisit that particular parameter, and are there different ways to manage it? What could those options be? And maybe come back to us at a later date, within a reasonable time anyway, to sort of revisit that particular piece and how we manage that overflow. I don't know if there's anybody that would sort of champion that with me, but it's a thought.
Is that a seconding, Councillor Cressman, or a question?
Yes, that was very similar to my thinking, that we would test drive this for a period of time in the vernacular, see how it worked, and if we needed adjustments, especially in that area, then we would have the ability to make modifications. And if the wider brain waves of the greater community knew a better way of handling it, as you know, then I think we're open to suggestions. But I think it gives us an opportunity to see where there's choke points and see how we can manage going forward.
Very good. I think Clerk Bunn might want to jump in there, and then we'll go to you, Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor, in that case, I would suggest probably we report back in February, give it 6 months, unless obviously council sees a concern earlier than that, then we can certainly come back with a report. But within 6 months, that'll give us a very good understanding of where we're at in terms of demand and also any of those pressure points that we would see.
Very good. Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, just following up on Clerk Bunn's comments, I like that idea, a 6-month review. And in reference to this point about 3 delegates, this is new for us, and these could be 3 different issues. We still have our regular process in place, and on issues where delegates asked to speak, that is to topics that are already on our agenda, we have as many as 10 delegates. Like we will have many delegates on topics that are on the agenda. These would be for new areas. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, and then one final point as well. I mean, something to consider here, even if you're not able to get on the agenda due to an overflow reason, let's remember we still have the ability to add correspondence. And given the timing of this, you know, if it's something that is pressing that needs to be on, you can reach out to individual members of council, but also submit some sort of documentation to be included with correspondence as well. So I think there's still going to be access, but this is a great first step that's going to provide greater transparency and accessibility.
I did just have a few questions. I just wanted to clarify, what is the amount of time that a delegate under general interest would have in front of council?
Through you, Mayor, the general, this is going to get confusing. The general guidelines for delegations then apply, and that would be 7 minutes. So it'd be consistent with the same as our specific delegations.
And, okay, so that would be potentially up to 21 minutes per meeting then. And then I did want to loop back around to the jurisdiction of the Township of Wilmot. I know it was brought up a few times. And I know on regional council, it's not in our procedural bylaw. We've had some very interesting delegation, shall I say. But those aside, on a whole, the general public has been very respectful and at least kept it within the realm of context that may have impacts to the region, whether directly or indirectly. I was certainly compelled by our delegates tonight to maybe look at a way to possibly loosen that up and maybe do it on a, if we need to reassess, we can reassess. But I'm curious what others' ideas are on that. Again, I'm going from the context of at the region, and I do know that there are items that may not fall into our jurisdiction, but I also know sometimes there are issues, like I'm thinking back to when we had the high school students last year on the trash can on Snyder's Road that they wanted, and that kind of fell in the cracks of we didn't really know whose jurisdiction it was. Got it sorted in the end. Thank you again. Director Catania is not here, but his staff did sort it out. So I guess I'm just kind of looking from that perspective, curious if others maybe want to assess that. Councillor Stu.
It's almost as though you read my mind. I was going to ask that we don't get too bogged down of jurisdiction or keep it more liberal as far as interest. I mean, to address the elephant in the room, if there are people who have concerns, and we might not be a decision-making authority directly, but I still want to hear from them. They are our residents, they are our taxpayers. So keep it a more of a broad stroke of general interest within the township. Just because something's on a regional road, I still want to hear from our residents, right? So I don't know if that would be through a motion or direction, or how that would, you would prefer that?
Through the clerk, through myself. No, I'm sorry, through the mayor. Yeah, so I think I have just 2 points on that. The first is when we did our research, it isn't uncommon to see jurisdiction mentioned as a way to align with the goals of a procedural bylaw, which is really to create an effective, efficient meeting on what council can make decisions on. That's the procedural side of it, that's the clerk side of it. I understand what you're suggesting, and certainly when we took this away, the direction from council was to stick to within jurisdiction. So if council would like to see that amended, I would just suggest an amendment to the wording that you would like to see.
I would like to raise an amendment to have the wording more so of general interest within the township, and more of like in a liberal sense, but general interest, and not get bogged down by the word jurisdiction.
From a clerk perspective, is that suitable wording, or do you have a preference on wording to get to the same goal?
Just so I understand correctly, and I think I do, but I think it's that we're striking the words, striking the words, I just want to make sure, actually, just, sorry, Mayor, just one moment, I just want to make sure I find the right place. Broadly, we can say striking jurisdiction and replacing with general interest, and just leave it at that. I think that's fair enough, it gives me enough direction.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Wilkinson, all those in favor of the amendment? Oh, sorry, my apologies, I forgot about the discussion part. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I can see both sides of this issue, because when we limit it to 3 individuals, and we would then, be raising issues that have things, the fire hazard in Jasper National Park, you ask yourself, is there other issues that are more, that pertain to the residents of this township that don't get, on the agenda because of that? So I can see the situation where we would be restricting hearing from issues that would be related to things that we actually had control of and could do something about. So, I guess I'd have to speak against the amendment.
Fair enough. Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I think, Councillor Cressman, your point is well taken, but I think to a certain extent, Mr. Reeser said it best when he made the point. It's sticking to things that are within general interest within the township. And I suppose that in order to sort of to be administered properly, you would need someone to have some sort of oversight to it, right? It would come down to, I guess, the example we heard earlier, there are trash cans on Snyder's Road. It's a regional road, but is it that we're providing an opportunity for that opinion and that issue to be amplified, right? Is that the purpose of it? But to your point, I mean, yeah, it's tragic what's happened in Jasper, but again, is there much value in having someone come and speak to that at all? So I guess the question would be, maybe to amend the amendment, is would we have to further define who gets to make that call or who uses that general judgment? And then is that 2 birds? I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I may be open to suggestion on that.
Just before we go to you, Councillor Sadhu, I would say probably my interpretation, but Clerk Bunn, correct me if you would think otherwise, that if the clerk and his team didn't deem it appropriate under general interest, that would then wind up with the CAO and myself, and we could make the judgment call. I do, though, get your point as well. Okay, Councillor Sadhu, and then we'll go back to you.
Yeah, my first thought was we don't have any mechanism as it stands right now to come delegate on stuff that's not on the agenda. So let's walk before we can run and worry about riding a bike, et cetera, et cetera. People do still have the ability to write in correspondence or email us or call us. So we shouldn't get too bogged down of, well, what if this, what if this? We do have a review process, hopefully, in the next 6 months. So that is something we can revisit if it is a concern. But I wouldn't get too bogged down of the what ifs in the future and certain circumstances. I mean, they could come and we can address it at that time. But as of right now, let's keep it open-ended. Let's general interest and then see. It's a fluid situation and we can see where we're at in 6 months from now. But like I said, as of right now, if someone wants to come and speak to something, they don't even have any channels to do so.
Councillor Cressman? I was going off of you wanting to speak.
Given that there is some internal evaluation by the mayor, et cetera, I can live with leaving it wide open, so I retract my previous.
Very good. Any other questions or comments on this part? No? Seeing none, I will call the vote on the amendment, and that would be to change the wording of 6.4.1 that currently states within the jurisdiction of to within general interest of. All those in favor of the amendment, and that's carried unanimously. Then the only other thing I did want to mention was just the period of 6 months before readdressing. Although I'm happy with there being a review period, perhaps looking at it then, as I'm gonna guess right now there's a lot of hot topics going on, that there's probably gonna be quite a waiting list. So maybe we look at addressing that then, unless there is any move for people to want to right now address that there's a wait period that they can come back and address council on an item. I'm kind of just throwing it out there. I'm not certain what the answer is. Curious on others' thoughts. No? Okay. Councillor Cressman?
I was thinking more in the line of 3 months wait period if you were speaking to the same topic as being, especially given that we're initiating with only three general interests. I was thinking if you spoke on a topic that and to come back and speak to the same topic, you might have to sit on your hands for 3 months. And I thought that might be a reasonable interval. So
Sure.
Does that?
Yeah. So would you be moving then?
I would move
to
that.
add that? Okay. Is there a seconder? Councillor Wilkinson, any comments or discussion on that item? Okay. Seeing none, then all those in favor of that amendment? That carries unanimously. I didn't have any more comments. Are there any more comments or questions from, I would just ask in the gallery to please remain quiet. Sorry. Any other questions from anyone before I turn it over to the clerk? Okay, seeing none. Oh, yes, the clerk would like an amendment just clarifying the 6-month report back time. He just essentially wants direction in writing for that. So moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor of that amendment? That carries unanimously. And so seeing no more questions or comments, I will call the vote on the motion as amended. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. I did have, before I jumped into reports, wanted to quickly ask if council would be open to waiving notice of motion regarding the discretionary funds. Just to quickly jog everyone's memory before I get you to vote on it, at budget we had created a joint discretionary funds with CAO and council. It was of $25,000 from the discussion that we had. A lot of it was in context of, we had originally pushed doing, adding in a communications budget for council. If we did a council-wide newsletter, for example, we pushed that off to the discretionary funds that council will be able to access at times. What we did not realize inadvertently when we did pass and made it a joint with the CAOs is that we didn't really create a mechanism for council to access those funds. So Director Clark and I have already discussed this, as have CAO Chambers and I. We were looking about perhaps separating out the CAO's portion, which I would propose half of the discretionary funds, and then council's portion, which would be half, in terms of a process then for councillors to access this funds. I'm open to discussion. What I would propose, based off of talking to other councils in the area, like Kitchener, for example, each councillor has a allotment of money that they are able to access throughout the year, kind of on discretionary. Of course, it would need to fall into reasonable guidelines of within the realm of our role of office. So whether that be you want to host a town hall, or you want to do a newsletter. I know there's been discussion of doing a joint council newsletter drop. Really just want to be able to make that financial split so that council is able to access those funds, as I know we've had some requests coming in for how to access them, and I've, like I said, spoken with the CAO Chambers, who would be comfortable with the 50-50 split for this year, and then next year for budgeting we can look at a better mechanism if we have desires for different spending non-council. So that's what I'm asking for notice of motion vote, which would require, because we are 5 tonight, 2/3 would be 4 people in support of waiving notice. And the reason for the urgency component is that we do have some colleagues who do want to do some outreach and don't currently have access to those funds. So I would look to, if there's somebody, I can't move it as the chair, but I would look if there's someone willing to move to waive notice. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. So for waiving notice, all those in favor? That carries. All those opposed? Okay, that carries. So now on the floor, I would need a mover and a seconder for the motion to split the discretionary funds. And then I would actually open it up for conversation as to if council has a different process they would like for us to access said funds. Councillor Sadhu, is that comment or?
No, I'm just moving the motion there.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Cressman. Any comments or questions then at this time? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I understand the need to discuss this, and I suppose understand the urgency to a certain extent, but I'm wondering if maybe a more in-depth review of the policy and a report back might be appropriate, given that we're talking about spending funds. It's, just to sort of be very clear on what is in place now, and then what we're proposing and how that might affect the current setup. I suppose I also have questions regarding, what's the current status? Has money been spent from that? I don't know. So those would be some things that I'm concerned about that we maybe don't have documented, that I feel should be in front of us prior to having a conversation.
So is that a motion to defer and request information from staff to bring back a report?
Through the chair, I guess we'll see if there's a seconder out there, but yeah, I don't think it would be unreasonable maybe to ask that we get a more formalized report back regarding this, maybe for the meeting in August. Okay, so right now that's been brought forward. Is there a seconder for a motion to defer? Okay, seeing none at this time, so we're back to the regular motion. Any other comments or questions on this motion? Councillor Sadhu?
Yeah, just a quick comment. So we've already gone through the deliberations of bringing upon this discretionary funds, and we've done the legwork on all of that. I think this is just a motion essentially just to give us a clear-cut way to access the funds and actually be able to use them. These aren't new funds, they're already there. They went through the whole budget process, so I guess I did move it. So that's my thinking, is it's not really adding anything new. It's essentially just clarifying, so if council or colleagues want to use these funds, there is a clear mechanism to do so.
Any other questions then? I know that I proposed the model of essentially splitting up the council portion to then be used by each councillor. Everybody has fair access to X amount of money, which will be the same amount for each. Is that suitable, or did anybody want to see a different process? The one thing I would also add in there that I'd like to see is just that council gets an update when somebody does choose to use the funds, just so that we really can be abridged of what our colleagues are doing, and it is public funds, of course. So if everybody is okay with that, yes? Okay, Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, maybe to Director Clark, is there a potential status update here? What is the current status of our discretionary funds? And then as well, as a follow-up to that briefly, is there a policy in place that would define what these can be used for?
So through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, currently there's no spending against either of the entire 25,000. There hasn't been any spending committed against it. In terms of an approved policy, nothing beyond the delegation of authority bylaw that allows the CAO to have authority on discretionary spending and those like types of spending. To the mayor's point, we did discuss how council would manage their portion, and so currently council has funding for training, for conferences, those types of things, and they have full discretion over that. This is a little bit more nuanced because there's no defined purpose, and so that's where the conversation around allocating it or coming up with a process is, that's the missing piece that would need to be established tonight, is if that money was set there, how could it be accessed and how could it be spent by the councillors based on their discretion. But that's really the only outstanding piece from my perspective.
Councillor Pressman?
Yeah, excuse me. I'm a little bit uncomfortable going through a process of developing policy on the fly on this one. And as such, can see where the wisdom of my compatriots' perspective. I also was going to ask, and I don't know if this is germane through you, Mayor, to Director Clark, is when will we anticipate a year-to-date update on our budget? Because I know that's off topic a little, and I'm going to get my wrist slapped, but I think it feeds into a greater discussion. So
For sure.
Maybe I can ask that offline after the meeting.
I will agree it's not germane. I will still answer it because I know that other people are probably curious. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but speaking to CAO Chambers, is at the August meeting we will be getting a financial update report. So then are you actually trying to second the deferral? I have no issue with it. I've brought forward what I want. Okay, so now we're back to a deferral. It has now been tabled. The deferral is that staff bring back a process for how council will access their 50% of the funds, I'm assuming. Nobody has problems with that part. And then the other 50 remain with the CAO. To be fair, that is originally what Dan did bring to us, and we just, through our long discussions during budget, went around that in the end. But okay, so it has been moved and seconded. All we can talk about is time and place then of deferral. So the proposal is that it comes back at the August meeting. Any questions or comments on time? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of deferring? All those opposed? Okay, and that carries. I think, yes, that moment of sober second thinking also got around to me too. Thank you, councillors. I do have a few announcements. And those who are leaving, if you just want to stay for the first one, because it's actually really exciting, I want to note that we have a Baden resident, Taylor Rook, who is competing at his first Olympic Games in Paris this year. Yes. So on behalf of the Township of Wilmot, we want to wish Tyler all the best. He's competing in men's cycling sprint and men's cycling team sprint. And on the 8th and 9th, I believe, are the dates that he's competing. So I do really encourage you to cheer on not only Team Canada, but our local Wilmot resident, and shout out to him. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the announcements, but I can also appreciate if you do need to go. August 1st, I want to acknowledge, is Emancipation Day in Canada. Emancipation Day marks the actual day in 1834 that the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 came into effect across the British Empire. Emancipation Day celebrates the strength and achievement of Black individuals and communities across Canada. On August 1st, Canadians are invited to reflect, learn about slavery in Canada, and the ongoing fight against anti-Black racism. August 9th is National Peacekeepers Day. And this important day was established in 2008 to recognize the contributions of Canadian Armed Forces, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, provincial and municipal police services, and Canadian diplomats and civilians who work in their support of international peace and security. On August 15th is National Acadian Day, and I did throw this in as, according to Census Canada, we have quite an Acadian population in the township and surrounding areas, and it's a time to celebrate the Acadian people and cultural vitality in Canada. I want to note some great things going on in Wilmot this summer. There is still time to join the Region of Waterloo's free TD Summer Reading Program for 2024. It's Canada's biggest bilingual summer reading program for kids of all ages, interests, and abilities. Check out our local library website for more details, or of course you can pop into any of our library locations. And you can also join Wednesday walks in Wilmot's wonderful woods. These are taking place from 7 until 8 p.m. and the next walk is happening on July 31st at the Morningside Trail in New Hamburg. So please do visit Let's Tree Wilmot's Facebook page for more details and information about the future walks. And thank you to Let's Tree Wilmot for highlighting our fantastic community. Castle concerts are continuing on Thursday nights between 7 and 8 p.m. in front of the castle, and admission is by donation. And there continues to be a great lineup for the rest of the season, running for 5 more weeks. Steinman Mennonite Church is hosting another blood donation on Monday, August the 5th from 2 until 8. Definitely call and book your appointment or go on to blood.ca, and I will just give a pitch to the Sirens for Life initiative as well. So if you choose to donate blood, you can contribute to the campaign that our first responders in the region are currently participating in. So you can register on blood.ca and either support the paramedic services, the fire services, or our police services in their competition for getting blood donations. The New Hamburg Board of Trade is hosting 2 upcoming events, one on August 7th at 7 p.m., which is music in Kirkpatrick Park featuring Twas Now. And of course, on August the 16th, the fan favorite from 5 until 9 is the annual cruise night on Huron Street and Peel Street. The Board of Trade has partnered with Interfaith Counseling for the 50/50 lottery and are asking folks to please bring non-perishable food items for the Wilmot Family Resource Center. August 17th and 18th is Mopar Fest, which, as many know, is Canada's largest Mopar show at the New Hamburg Fairgrounds, and you can visit moparfest.com for more details. I have a lot of announcements. Wilmot Fire Department's, this is a general FYI, administrative division has moved to 30 Neville Street in New Hamburg, and you can visit the finance counter at the Township Administrative Complex to continue to purchase your burn permits. Our Wilmot Aquatic Center is offering adapted aquatics this fall. And this new 45-minute specialized program will be offered on Saturdays from 4 or 4:45 p.m. for people with disabilities who are 3 years or older. Enroll during this fall registration, which will open on September 5th. And the last one, I promise, at least from me, is Grand River Transit is looking for ways to expand transit services in the townships over the next 5 years. So if transit users in Wilmot and the other townships please do complete the online survey at grt.ca/township. And that includes, I know we have many specifically students who are asking out in New Dundee and St. Agatha for services. So please do fill out the survey so that can hopefully be reflected in the region's 5-year plan. Those are all of my announcements. Does anyone have anything else they would like to mention? Okay, seeing none. Sounds good. Business arising from closed. I just need the clerk when he has a moment. So the business arising out of closed is that the mayor, CAO, and manager of human resources be directed to proceed with working collaboratively on a revised CAO performance evaluation policy, and that the new process/policy be presented in open session by the end of September 2024. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Our confirmatory bylaw, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And adjournment, moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you and have a great evening.